due to the hurdles they facing, the financial demands of political activities, the lack of mentorship and support networks, and of course, the absence of policies that are specifically promoting youth and women inclusion in matters of parliamentary democracy and governance generally. And it is for this reason that PNR, Parliamentary Network Africa, has mooted this concept with the support of the French Embassy in Ghana to work towards enhancing civic participation of youth and women in Ghana, particularly within the parliamentary landscape. It is in Ghana's youth and women face a web of challenges in entering, including engagement in parliament. There are deep-seated cultural norms, often working against women's involvement, while the child enumerated earlier, or compound the ability or the inability of men to join and participate in the governance arrangement in our country as strongly as they would love to do. Some of the statistics, that point to youth participation, women participation in governance and parliamentary work are quite staggering. So, for example, despite the various efforts that those of us in civil society and other groups have put into youth participation in the legislative process, data by the Inter-Parliamentary Union, which is the association or the union of parliaments across the world, paints some bleak pictures so far as Ghana is concerned. For example, only 2.3% of across the world, first of all, percent of parliamentarians across Africa are under 30, with Ghana faring even worse. So you would find, just a handful of Ghanaian MPs, being within the youth bracket. So, for example, while young people below 35 are making up about 73% of Ghana's population, only 0.7%, and I repeat, 0.7%, which is less than 1% of the current members of parliament in Ghana are below the age of 35, according to IPU's data. And of course, we already know the situation when it comes to women in parliament. At the moment, we are hovering around 14.55% of our parliamentarians being women. And this is even at a time when we've seen some progress in the number of women that makes up parliament. So all of these data and statistics goes to point to the very worrying trend, because if we've got to be participating, participation means that you must also have a seat at the table. To effectively participate, you must be where the game is going on. Other than that, then you can only be a spectator and not necessarily participating. And so the efforts that we are trying to put in working with students, unions, working with campus students' parliaments, campus parliaments, working with youth associations and groups on campuses and what have you, and also working with women associations and women groups across the country, is intended to ensure that we would shine the light on the need for more young people, more women to be actively involved in the governance process, especially in parliament, and in a way that also shows that these young people, these women are capable, competent enough to be able to head in discussions and decision making. Under this dream or goal that here at Parliamentary Network Africa, we've mooted the concept of enhancing civic participation of youth and women in Ghana project. It is intended to become a platform where we will provide training, we'll provide tools of young people and women to actively participate in Ghana's parliamentary processes, especially. The project seeks to, among other things, young people and women with knowledge that will be needed for active participation in the parliamentary level of participation of young people and women in Ghana's governance architecture. So in today's Inception meeting, we are simply going to tell you more about the project, what it constitutes, what are the components, how you can get involved, how we are looking at working with you as leaders of students and young people on various campuses, and as leaders of various youth organizations to ensure that we are able to achieve this ultimate goal. And once again, let me thank you for joining us. I hope that the rest of the time during this conversation will be worth your while. Feel free to put up your questions, to make your contributions, and we are more than happy to take these things into consideration even during the period of implementing this project. Over to you, Cynthia.
All right, thank you very much for that opening remarks. I see in the chat box, Abdul Razak Musa has introduced himself. He's from the Northern Regional Youth Parliament. I also see Hilaria Dongo, Executive Director of Restorative City, Bolgatanga, Upper East Region. Kindly use the chat box out else. Mute your microphones when you want to send us a question while the presentation is going on. Use the chat box, but you may also raise your hand, and then I will yield the floor to you to speak when the time is right. We want this to be very interactive, so please use this that I have indicated. I think I would now give the floor to my colleague, that is Mr. Benjamin, to give us a presentation on the project. Thank you. Benjamin, over to you.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. Good morning, everyone. I believe you can hear me.
I can hear you. I don't know if the rest.
Okay, and I believe you can see
if you can hear him. But I'm sure they are, so you can come.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon once again to everyone gathered in here. I think our executive director has done us the honors of providing a good background to or a good context to why, as an organization, this project is so dear to our hearts. And so I'll be sharing the details of the project, basically what objectives we are seeking to achieve, and then also what are the key or the major activities that we would be implementing under the project. And then we'll look at how, of course, you all can be involved in these activities, in these processes. And then finally, we'll look at how or what we are expecting out of this project. If you're able to implement, if you're able to achieve all the objectives in this project, what would we have been able to do or be able to promote in terms of enhancing civic participation of youth and women in Ghana? My name is Benjamin Opokwaye. I'm a senior programs officer at Parliamentary Network Africa. So I wouldn't bore you much with these figures. As I said, our executive director has been able to he gave us some of these figures. And so clearly you see how low participation of youth and women in parliament, not just in Ghana, but also across African parliaments, is very low. Yes, in Ghana, the Ghana Statistical Service clearly reports that the population, about 73% of Ghana's population is under 35. Yet, when you come to parliament, you have just about 14.55% of women, and you have just about 0.7% of MPs who are under 30 or who are youth. And this is woefully inadequate, especially considering that clearly the population we have It's a youthful population, if you like. Again, he mentioned some of the traditional roles of youth. Usually you would see the youth, the young people participating in politics, grassroots politics. You'd see mostly political parties engaging them when they need votes. You'd see them as foot soldiers, engaging in all the violence and all of that. But you ask yourself, is that the best use of our youth in Ghana? Is that something that we desire for our country? Again, for women, I mean, anytime women show up to contexts to participate in the highest decision-making forums and all of that, you have a lot of opposition against them. Popularly, you'd find cyberbullying, people insulting them, people pulling them down on the internet and all of that. And most especially also when it comes to financing their activities or financing their campaign and all of that, owing to the cost of politics, very, very expensive. And all of these things are what hinders young people and women from actively participating in parliament. So, like I said, these are basically the barriers, the financial demands of political activities. We run in our country a very expensive campaign processes in here. Political parties spend a lot campaigning and all of that. And so this makes it very expensive. And for women, for young people who want to engage in politics, who want to contest for highest positions and all of that, they are discouraged to do that because of these demands that come with participating in politics. Again, we find that people or young women, young people lack the mentorship, they lack the support networks to effectively, find their way around engaging in parliaments, engaging in politics, engaging in basically how they can get involved. Someone may be in the village, they may not know how they can even engage their MPs, how they can engage their assemblies and all of that. These sometimes can be very challenging if there are no guidance to young people and women. And of course, the absence of policies to deliberately ensure that young people and women are engaged or are included in decision making. For some countries, you have specific legislation that ensures that even for parliament, there is no law that is passed unless parliament has engaged citizens, has engaged the public, and has engaged the youth before they can pass such bills or such laws. But here in our case, in Ghana, even in the case of laws that will promote women inclusion, that will promote youth inclusion, we are not getting them. For instance, over a decade or for years, we've been pushing for the passage of the Affirmative Action Bill, which is still in Parliament. And all of these things hinder young people's participation in Parliament. So if all of these happens, what then? What do we see as a consequence of the young people or women not being able to participate in Parliament or participate in the processes of Parliament? I'm sure you may have heard about the recent protests or uprising in Kenya, which led to the youth in Parliament passing a particular bill that increases taxes on food and other commodities. They protested the bill into law, which of course they succeeded. But we ask ourselves, if the youth, if young people were involved in all of these processes, I'm sure they may have expressed some concerns for Parliament to have taken notes of them, but that wasn't done. And so what happens is you give no option to young people, you give no option to women than to protest. They take up arms, they take up any other forms of violence they would get, and they protest the decisions of Parliament, they protest the decisions of those within the highest political offices. Again, they attempted to find alternative means of expressing their discontent towards the political regime or towards, the decisions that are being taken without involving them and all of that. And these means can all include violent means, of course. If they resort to peaceful means and they are not heard, they will then resort to violent means, which can be very worrying for us. And finally, for laws or decisions made without considering youth voices, without considering the interest of women, usually you find that these laws do not fully represent the interest of the people that it will affect. They do not fully represent the concerns of the young people in Ghana. They do not represent the concerns of women and all of that. And these in the end can make the laws that are passed in Parliament not achieve the essence for which they were passed. And so here we want to now look at why or what we want to do to avert this situation, or how we want to handle the situation, and that is project. And so the basic objectives, or the main objective of this project, is to empower youth, women for active participation. And so the whole idea is how we can engage young people, how we can empower young people, how we can equip them to ensure that they are effectively participating in the decision-making processes of Parliament, how we can ensure that from the opportunities to engage parliamentarians, to engage committees, and to engage those in authorities that matters when it comes to critical decision-making that affects our lives. Again, we also seek to increase the understanding of young people and women on the parliamentary processes. I know it can be very challenging when you want to be involved in what Parliament does, yet you really do not understand the processes, you do not understand the procedures and the practices of Parliament. You do not even know how you can get involved, the mechanisms available for you to use to engage parliamentarians or committees. And so we want to also increase young people's understanding of what processes exist in Parliament and how they can effectively participate once they are equipped to do. Let's look at what activities we want to implement under this. One of the major activities that we would be implementing here is for us to create platforms where youth or young people and women can participate in the work of Parliament. And to be able to achieve this, or to do this, our goal is to organize town hall meetings across Ghana in the various regions, where we will bring together citizens, we will bring together young people, we will bring together women, of course, women groups and all of that, to engage amongst ourselves, to engage their parliamentarians, to engage their representatives and all that. And these issues that we are able to record or document from these meetings are supposed, or are going to help us to present our voices or the youth voices to Parliament, which will also, in a way, help to set the parliamentary agenda. So if Parliament hears or Parliament receives for instance, receives a policy brief, receives a publication out of this town hall meeting, it only informs them or it tells them that the people within the northern region are interested in this project, are interested in this policy, are interested in you passing this particular bill or taking such critical decisions that will affect them. And so in doing this, we hope that these these town hall meeting to Parliament's agenda. Again, we would be organizing virtual speaker series where we would invite experts, we would invite notable speakers who are knowledgeable about the subject or topic of youth participation, women participation in Parliament and all of that, so that we can again engage in a dialogue amongst ourselves, and the outcome of these dialogues will be communicated to Parliament. So we are going to have a series of these virtual discussions or virtual dialogue series, and it will help us to effectively understand how we can engage with parliamentarians. And finally, under this, one of the innovative ways that parliaments across Africa, across the globe, use to bring citizens closer to the institution of Parliament is to organize an open Parliament Day. What does this mean? This basically means that Parliament is going to have, or together we are going to work with Parliament to organize this day, a day where the doors of Parliament will be open to the public, a day where citizens can freely enter the premises of Parliament, will have access to the departments, will have access to the committees, will have access to their MPs and ask questions, basically to learn and understand how Parliament works and how they can effectively engage. So this is an innovative approach that we want to use to bring citizens or bring youth and women closer to Parliament. We will also, under this project, organize mock Parliament sessions. And so we are going to have a session where, just like it happens in Parliament, we will have young people who would discuss or debate several issues. Of course, these issues would be issues that Parliament is also discussing or Parliament is considering and all of that, so that once we have these dialogue, we have these debates, the outcome of this session would be shadow reports that we would now present to Parliament. So like typically Parliament or a parliamentary committee would discuss maybe a government policy or government program and report to the plenary. Same way, we also want to produce shadow reports and basically share this report with Parliament, share it with committees and those who matter in Parliament for their consideration. And we believe that once we are able to do this, it will give much voice to young people in Ghana, and it will help the needs of young people and women to be represented in the affairs of Parliament. Of course, we would also train young people on how Parliament works, on the practices and procedures of Parliament, so that young people can understand how Parliament actually operates, what are the lawmaking processes. If you want to engage a committee, what are the processes? What are the tools you can use? If you want to engage your MP, how do you go about it? What is the first port of contact that you can engage to ensure that your issues are presented to Parliament? We will be taking young people through these training to be able to do that. Now, we also would be working with the of Ghana. We would be training GRASAG members on parliamentary affairs, research, and advocacy. We are doing this because we recognize the level of knowledge, level of expertise or skills that young people have, or young graduates have. And so you have members of the GRASAG who are graduate students and who are undertaking courses or who are learning in several areas and have several knowledge that they can support Parliament with. And so the idea is for us to train and equip them. We will equip 50 GRASAG cohorts where we would take them through the legislative processes and how they can support Parliament. And so in the end, what we are seeking to achieve is that this cohort is going to support the work of committees, is going to support parliamentarians by virtue of providing them with their research expertise, so supporting them with generating evidence to back the decisions that they take in Parliament, both at committee and both and also at a plenary. So in the end, we are hoping that this cohort of GRASAG members would be trained in parliamentary research to understand even the tenets, to understand the foundations of conducting parliamentary research, which can be very technical. But once they understand these, then they are capable to use the various tools available to generate evidence to support the work of Parliament. We are also hoping by virtue of this project to set an agenda to establish a youth or women parliamentarians forum, right? One of the ways that parliamentarians or young parliamentarians can also build up themselves to effectively, participate in the work of Parliament is for them to receive the necessary training and the necessary support. And so what we are seeking to do, and in fact, from our experience, we have realized that when it comes to certain issues that MPs are expected to know or understand, they lack the knowledge or they have inadequate understanding of these subjects. And so, for instance, open parliaments, open governments, we want to train young people or young women who have been elected into the 9th Parliament on the concept of open parliament, right? Which basically ensures that Parliament is transparent, Parliament is accountable, and Parliament is engaging citizens in the work that they do. So we are looking forward to train the new crop of MPs who will be elected into the 9th Parliament. And we are hoping that these crop of MPs also, after receiving the training, would also support or also provide that platform to nurture, to mentor other students and young people who are aspiring to also enter into politics. So it's about us equipping them. It's about us, giving them the necessary tools and information. And then also for young people who are involved in this project, how can we connect them to these young parliamentarians to mentor them, to nurture them for future positions in politics? If we are able to do all of these, then this project would help us to increase youth and women's engagement in parliamentary processes. If you followed all that I have shared, you realize that pointing to increasing youth participation, it's pointing to increasing women's engagement in the work of Parliament, whether directly with MPs, whether that will come like that. So if you're able to do this, then in the end, you'll be able to achieve that. And then also by way of increased capacity of GRASAG members to effectively, conduct support Parliament, then while we strengthen young, and their knowledge will be increased, will enhance or improve their knowledge on the subject of parliamentary openness, and also the need for them to engage citizens in the work that they do. And finally, of course, this project will be creating several platforms for young people to participate, for young people to be mentored, and for young people to engage MPs in Parliament. So this project is being supported by the French Embassy, and we are hoping that throughout this project, we'll come back to you, represented in here, we'll come back to you for your participation. We'll come back to you to take your insightful inputs into the project and your contributions into the project. And so we hope that going forward, we'll collaborate effective on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you too very much for that wonderful presentation. I have earlier indicated that if you have any questions, you indicate that in the chat box. You can also use the chat box to introduce yourself. So you mention your name, your organization, and where you're joining us from. Without much ado, I would yield the floor to Madam Joyce Nyame, who is the Program Officer for Youth Bridge Foundation. And she would give us a presentation on the status of youth and women participation in Ghana's civic space. For the want of time, I think we would take all the questions after every presentation. So let her finish her presentation. If you have any questions on Ben's presentation, you note that down so that when this presentation is also done, you can put all of them together and ask them at the same time. Thank you. Madam Joyce Nyame, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. Hello, everyone. I'll put off my video so I don't get any interruption. Joanne, please, are you helping with the projection?
Yes, Joyce, kindly hold on for me for a second.
Okay. So as you wait for the projection, my name is Joyce Nyame, and I am with the Youth Bridge Foundation, and we are inspired to make sure that young people across Africa are made aware of the things that concern them, and then they are also able to contribute to building inclusive and responsive structures that will respond to the needs of their development goals. So this presentation is focusing on the status of the youth and women representation when it comes to the civic space. And for this contest, the presentation will focus on the district and national elections. So we'll be looking at data and some barriers to young people and young themes into these spaces, and then how we move on to ensure that there is inclusivity, as Ben had already mentioned, the project is looking out for. So as we still wait for the presentation, for
Just
the
a minute,
first...
Joyce.
Okay.
Hello, Joyce. Yeah, just a
Yes,
minute.
John.
I've made you a post so you can share from your end.
Okay. Please, can we see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes, we
can see.
Okay, so I had touched on the first slide, and then this is the structure for my presentation. We will subject matter. We will look at the status of representation at the national and local levels. We look at some prospects and challenges, and then we'll look at what we term the fixing the wreck, because we think most of the challenges is a wreck and we need to fix that. Then we come to the conclusion. So the segmentation, as I had mentioned, for the Youth-Based Foundation, we work with the National Youth Policy from 2010, and then the definition for the youth within this policy is any individual who is aged between 15 to 35. But for the context of elections, we look at young people who are 18 to 35, because per the Constitution, if one is not 18, the person is not eligible to vote. And then also, if one member of parliament, one has to be 21 years of age. So even though when one is turned 18, the person can vote. Unless one is 21, the person cannot vie for an MP in Ghana. But when we come to the district level, one who is 18 can vie for district assembly positions. But with this definition, when we are looking at the youth segmentation, we are looking at the variety of things that make up an 18-year-old or a 35-year-old. We are looking at one's gender. We are looking at the age of that particular person, because we are saying that a young person or a youth is someone who is 15 up to 35. So if you want to look at the segmentation, if you really want to understand the issues when it comes to barriers or the prospect for civic engagement, it's important we look at this category, not have to appreciate the diversities in terms of gender, in terms of age, in terms of education. And education, you are looking at whether one has been to school before, whether one has been a dropout, whether one is completed. And you're also looking at disability, whether one has any kind of form of disability, because this really informs one's aspirations, one's expectations, or even the structures that as policymakers or stakeholders we need to put in place for them to participate fully in the civic space. We are also looking at location. So when Ben was speaking, he had touched on the fact that this project seeks to really tailor solutions, locations they come from. This is important because regardless of whether one is 18, whether one is 20, whether one is 35, the specific location one finds him or herself is also very, very important, because of, as we all know, there are certain public amenities that most of our regions have than others. So if you're looking to how to get to the young person in Ashanti region, even in the Ashanti region, whether Kumasi or Ejiso or those places, it's important you factor in the location so that you can tailor or make sure that the intervention addressed to that particular person in that location. So location is one of the varieties that we need to be conscious of when we are also, whether someone is 18 or 35, the period is a transitional period. The person is moving from a point to another point. That is how we are saying that we are youth. So mostly people will say that youth are the future leaders. But if you don't take care of us now, how do you become the future leaders? So now we are saying that we are the now leaders, because most of the things that are happening. And then when we get to the other side, you will see that, as Ben has said, over 23% in population are under 35 years. So it means it's a youthful population. So we need to look at the diversity when we are talking about the youth, and we don't just say youth, and then we just give a one-fits-all approach in addressing our concerns when it comes to civic participation. Then in the same segmentations, we are looking at what the realities are. The reality is the fact that in Africa as a continent, is youthful. There is a projection that by 2050, the African continent will be over 70% youth. And then, as I had said, 73% of the Ghanaian population is below 35. There are things that are happening that we can't ignore. There is a need for us to nurture young people for this particular context we are talking about, civic engagement and participation. And then Ben had touched on one of the key things when it comes to civic engagement is the representation. You can't say that you're engaging young people when they are not on the table. So the fact that we are majority of the continent and the continent is seen as youthful. And if I say continent, I'm referring to Ghana is part of the conversation. We need to really nurture young people into civic engagement and participation, which involves representation that is being on the table. The reality is we need that hold in nurturing young people. Time is a resource. So as a nation, we need to look at how time is of the essence. How do we make sure that young people, right from the onset, are built in a way that would be involved in the civic space, from the family, school, right up the party level and the national level? We are looking at resource acquisition. Ben and Samuel had made reference to the cost of politics. In terms of resources, capacity development, skill development, training, young people are able to acquire these necessary skills in nurturing us from our youthful stage into a stage where we can say that we are fully ready and fully prepared to be part of the civic engagement. And then also there's the need for reorientation and attitudinal change. We are talking about youth being 18 to 35, as the broader category. We know that in most of our cultural setting, there are certain adages, certain things that we say that if you are not careful, will let young people be called into a corner until they are 35. Something like, say, akarani penny enya sema, akarani dear kranye, those kind of things. So growing up, we are brought up in a way that even if you have an issue with an elderly, you don't have to say anything because the person is an elderly person. No offense, or I'm not saying that young people should be disrespectful, but what I'm saying is the fact that some of these things tend to up within the family, and that shape the way we relate when it comes to the civic space. Then it comes to the female factor. Be a young person with all these things that I have stated, it becomes a bit more complicated when you are a female because of certain historical and sociocultural notions that we've brought up with. So Ben had mentioned the way young females or even women in general are generally not willing to participate in the civic space because of the way we are brought up. So all these are some of the things we need to accept as our reality in Ghana and Africa as a whole in trying to address the youth participation in the civic space. Then we are looking at the representation, and then we'll start with the national. With a link on, this link takes us to a policy brief that we had done here at the Youth Brief Foundation, detailing some of the obstacles that young people face across Africa and then how we can solve them. So if the presentation is shared, we can go to the policy brief and get more information about that. But this presentation is focused on a research that the Youth Brief Foundation conducted in 2020. So we did a research during the parliamentary election, the 889 aspirants in the 2020 elections. Only 155 were between the ages of 21 and 35. This is 17% of the whole candidature. Only 155. 155, only 12 got the nod to go into parliament after the elections. So of the 899 seats, 99 people who were vying 75. This is how the young people were faring. And then on the right side of the presentation, you will see that of the total, 15% were women. So even the youth, someone will say that we got a bit high of a percentage. That is something to celebrate, but it also brings us to the issue that there is more work to be done. More reason why UB Foundation is happy and excited to join this conversation in trying to inspire young people to vie for some of these positions. Then this is also the, as I have said, the total of the people, the young people who are in parliament as of the 2020 election. So we realize that the figures are very, very minimal in relation to what Ben has said with the African continent. When it comes to Ghana, is also minimal. And then young people are not within the winnable seats that we have from in the Ghanaian parliament. And then we also went ahead to do a bit of an analysis on the party aspirants in terms of the young people who had aspired for positions within the political parties. We had the MPP having 10.32% and the NDC having 16.13%, and the other parties altogether had 25%. So this is a conversation we can have on other spaces and see how we are making sure that young people especially are taking advantage of positions within the party level, and how the parties are also supporting young people to vie for the positions to go into parliament. The breakdown of the regional candidatures are also here. I'll move on to the other slides. So we talk about other issues. So from the onset of the 8th parliament that we have now, we had 12 young people in parliament. Then this is also a reduction in the former parliament. So in the 7th parliament, we had 5% of the youth in parliament, in the 7th parliament. But the 8th parliament, we have 4%. So this is a reduction of that. Then another rec that the research brought out was the female reduction. So we saw that there was a reduction in female representation in the 8th parliament from the 7th parliament. And this is also something that brings forth to the issue of gender and how we relate to gender issues. And Ben had mentioned the affirmative action as an institutional mechanism to make sure that young people are going into parliament, and also females are also going into parliament. Let's come to the district level. We are looking at the first part of the presentation was on national level, the parliament, and then here we are looking at the district level. And then the contest will be on the just ended district assembly elections. So of the total of 5,734 elected officials, only 1,657 are young people. That is 28% of the total. This is an analysis we had done from a data we got from the EC. Then when we come to the elected young people, of them, you have 34% being female youth. So this is the total elected officials, and then female youth within this total is 34. That is 0.591%, and the males 28%. In comparing these two figures, one might say that of the total, the young males are leading, so it's a good thing. It's a good thing, but it's a contest for us to aspire to ensure that there is inclusivity in the spaces that we are working at to make sure that representation and participation are improved. So of the elected young people, you see that the females are also on the lower side. With all these figures and then some of the contests that we have created, we are looking at some of the prospects and challenges when it comes to youth and female participation in the civic space. Before I go on, I would like to show a video. So we are looking, this first slide, we look at the prospects that we have in terms of entry points for youth and female participation. So I'll crave our indulgence to watch this video. I think it's under 4 minutes. Then we'll have a conversation on how certain stakeholders ensuring that young people are going into the civic space.
I believe that for the young men who are to be here, basically some of them are starting their leadership journey, and that is when you have a full effect. Also, but today, I think that's a couple of leadership. That's what it's a process I would like to go for. My name is Agripo Popo. Contacting for assembly member in North Central. Actually, I within a Bantam constituency.
My name is from Electoral area in the Summer Dredging municipality. I'm contesting for the uniform team member in my area.
I'm inspired to contest for assembly member because I believe that in our governance structure there should be representation, particularly with the youth. And so I thought, of course, we do not have the financial model to outright contest for bigger positions. But then the concept of the assembly gives us that leverage or that level playground where we are able to participate in leadership, participate in representation. And of course, I am very happy that, of course, throughout the journey, I've had inspiration and a backbone, particularly in ensuring that, of course, I was successful in my first term, and subsequently the encouragement that led me to contest for my second term, which I'm quite optimistic that God is going to crown us with victory.
I have a lot to offer in decision making and governance. At my age, people think I can't handle the injury in myself, but that doesn't matter. What matters, what I want to offer in decision making and governance. A time for me, the youth to also take part in decision making and governance doings.
I want to use this opportunity to encourage a lot of the youth. Most of us have a lot to offer. Basically, before I became an assembly member, there were a lot of questions, there were a lot of doubt in my but until I was given the opportunity, I could never have proved me. So I believe that, of course, these little strides are the very things that the station of deposited in us. And so I'm encouraging each and every one of us, particularly the youth, to give some level of focus to the concept of our local governance or our local government system, so that, of course, you look out for unit committee, you look out for assembly, and then it becomes a so big leadership going forward.
Okay, so this is a contest for the prospect that we are coming to talk about. There is the district level elections, where, as one of the people in the video had said, since there's less in that area, young people can venture into. That is a prospect within the civic space that young people in there. and also the party level, where young people, apart from the youth wings that we see, that level is also an entry point and a prospective arena that young people and women especially can also access to make sure that they are effectively engaged in the civic space. And also one of the prospective things I see here and from the video is the creating awareness on these avenues. So if the avenues are there and then people do not know the avenues, Ben had mentioned that there is the need for young people to be trained on processes. Training comes with awareness creation. So if people know, then they become inspired and then they are interested in vying for those positions. They will make sure that any resource that they need to make sure that they vie for the positions, they would get the resources and be there. And also, there's a need for capacity. That's how come we do the work that we do here at the UB Foundation. And also, I think that is basis for this particular project that the PNA is bringing out. And also an entry point and also a prospect, a piece of hope for us is the retention of young MPs in Parliament and also the new entrants. So on the left side of the presentation, you will see that during the foundation had engaged young people who were vying for different positions at the district level. So the people we had gotten, on my left, you see the young faces who won a position. And then what we are doing is the fact that even if those who are not here did not win, we are still seeing how we support and nurture the interest that they have to make sure they are able to be effective in the civic space without necessarily being in any known public office. So this is a prospective entry that we are happy about, and we are exploring those aspects. Then also another entry point and another prospect is the fact that currently in the 8th Parliament, the youngest MP is a female. So this is something, this is a hope that we can use to tell other young females that, hey, it can be an good that we are talking about here. Then we look at the challenges. One of the challenges that we find from our years of work is the fact that most people go into the into Parliament. Within this context, the Parliament, the national level Parliament as a case study. Almost most of them left at the first year, left the age bracket at the first year. So it makes it, even though we push for young people to go in the subsequent, then you see that within the first year in Parliament, they are out of the youth bracket. But regardless, we see how they are used as icons, they are used to mentor the existing youth within the bracket and also at Parliament to get into Parliament. Also, there's the issue of youth apathy. For us here in our field of work, we make sure that we just don't say that youth are not interested in the things that we are doing. So, for instance, if you guess below, you realize that during the voter registration for young people, you see socio-cultural barriers, the things we are talking about as a young person, you're not supposed to do that, you are supposed to be here, in the specific times that the engagements are done, are they conducive, are they effective for young people who are expected to do certain things within the cultural setting? Is it favorable for them to be part? Is it favorable for them to voice out their issues without fear or favor because of the context that we find ourselves? These are issues. So why would I want to register if I think my registration will not make, my voting will not make any difference? So if we are talking about youth apathy, these are issues we are concerned about. We are looking at limited financial resources, cost of politics. Do we have the money? Do you have the capacity? Remember, resources is not just about money. We are looking at skill. We are looking at how we are able to get, even ascertain what we need to make us fruitful in what we want to do. All these things are fundamental to what we see now, and then we say that there's youth apathy in the system. Youth are not interested. We are looking at institutional barriers. How are institutions like Parliament ensuring that young are able to assess some of the things that they do? So Ben had mentioned procedures in Parliament. Policies, information are in formats that young people can access, because if knowledge is power. If you know, then you might be inspired. Even if you are not inspired, you know that when you see a young people up there, either you are supporting the person or you yourself are also in that position to be part of it. So all these are some of the challenges that when we're talking about civic participation, civic engagement. And then another angle is the civic representation of young people within this space. We look at to make sure that they are addressed to be inclusive, responsive. For us, we think this is a wreck, and I think we all agree with the fact that looking at the data that we are having, young people, females within the national and local level is a wreck. So we have this policy brief that will be coming out very soon, which we call the Kwashiorkor democracy. We think we are experiencing a democracy which is Kwashiorkor. And then if you know what Kwashiorkor is, you see someone, I even learned now adults can be Kwashiorkor, so I won't say young people who are Kwashiorkor. You see someone who looks a bit healthy, but the person has a protruded stomach. And you think the person, maybe the stomach is full of goodies of good food, but it's not, it's just malnutrition. So how do we address this Kwashiorkor person? So we call it fixing the wreck, because youth matter. We are looking at youth segmentation and stakeholder mapping. As I had said initially, if we don't segment the youth based on the nuggets that I had mentioned, gender, location, age, aspiration, etc., it will be difficult for us to address their needs and concerns. If you are trying to get a teenage mother to be part of the civic engagement, how do you make sure that you get to her at the time that is convenient? Because that mother wouldn't leave her child or his child. For this matter, we are talking about inclusion. That teenage person will not leave his or her child to come and engage. So you are looking at how to meet teenage mother or teenage father in a space that the person is comfortable and then also willing to engage. We are looking at creating and sustaining conducive and inclusive civic platforms. So it's not just the creation, it's also how we make sure we are sustaining them. So we don't just have ad hoc initiatives, ad hoc platforms where there are lots of them, but there's no sustaining momentum where there can be growth and maturity in terms of the kind of young people who are engaging and representing us. And also, this is very crucial. There's a need for us as a nation and as CSOs, as stakeholders, to consciously invest in the human capital of the young people. With this, we are talking about formal, informal education. If we say education, it's not just the classroom. There are other spaces that young people can develop their capacity, their skill. You're also looking at the soft and hard skill. There are certain ethical consciousness that we need to adapt when we are going into certain spaces. There are rules and regulations within each space. So we have to be in the know so that we can act accordingly. There is a need for institutional coaching and mentorship. This is also part of the investment that we need to invest in making sure that we are creating and sustaining the conducive civic platforms that we want young people and women, and having a reorientation of the things that we think we know. So we've come to be part of certain ideologies. There is a need for us to really have a second thought of these ideologies, these attitudes, and say whether they are supporting what we want as a sustainable development goal. If these are not helping us, we need to have a reorientation and then have different nuggets of the way we relate to ourselves as people, as young people, as women. So in conclusion, I would like to re-emphasize the point that civic participation is a fundamental pillar of democratic governance. So we are saying that there is a need for inclusion in the civic space. This is fundamental because we are looking at a democratic space, and here, democratic governance. So being able to have this inclusiveness is the fact that creating our support for a sustainable development goal, we are saying that we are addressing the concerns of everyone within the society. And then this is also fundamental in creating equal opportunities for all in the civic space. And this underlines what we do at the Youth Foundation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Madam Joyce Obeng for that, for that insightful presentation. I know that we are a little behind time as we had indicated, but we would now take the questions. If you have any questions, if you have any comments to make, kindly use the chat box, or you can raise your hand and then I'll call you, then you can speak. So you can make those in relation to the two presentations that have been made so far. Okay, I also see the chat box being used for introduction. I see Al Hassan Musa from the Speaker of Parliament for the Northern Regional Youth Parliament, and Philemon Bagado, Youth Parliament's SDD, and among others. If you have any questions, you can also use the chat box to ask those questions. Or raise your hand and then I'll call you. So I've seen Abdul Razak. Please, you can unmute yourself and then ask your question.
All right, so thank you very much. I think it's actually a very interesting discussion. I've listened to the first presenter, and I noticed that throughout the presentations, there's been an issue of financial constraints by the youth, and that has always been what has prevented the youth from actively engaging in politics and all that. I feel it is as a result of the monetization of our politics. Under normal circumstances, I do not think that politics would have required so much money that youth and women cannot afford in order to actively engage in it. But I think the kind of politics that is being done, especially in Ghana, is one that is highly monetized to a point that as a politician, you would have to give people huge sums of money in order to get their indulgence and all that. So I feel that is one of the issues. And I actually want to know, with regards to the project, what are you going to do in relation to that to ensure that youth are incentivized to actively engage in politics? Thank you.
Thank you too. I think this goes to Ben. So even answer this question. Okay, Joanna can also come in to answer the question if Ben is not ready. But in the meantime, Musa too can speak. Yeah. So Musa, you may ask your question.
Okay, I'm not sure Musa has unmuted himself. We can do that, but quickly, yes, we also realize that challenge that monetization of politics now is a big issue, and this project really is to sensitize our youth and women in the space that yes, there are other avenues that we can look at. It more or less stands as a stumbling block, but it can come with time and with us knowing that there are a lot of opportunities in the space available to us that we can use other than what is already existing. I mean, we've come to realize that there's a lot of money going around in the system. Other advocacies are going on about that. And so we are all playing our role, we are all playing our part, trying to make our political space more conducive for all of us to partake in. So this project itself may not be able to directly deal with such an issue as the monetization of politics, but we partner with other civil society organizations that are also advocating to reduce the monetization of politics. So yes, we are playing our part in that sense, but all the same, it is taken into consideration and we'll look at that going forward. I'll leave it here for now.
Okay, thank you. Musa, you will now ask your question. Is Musa here with us?
Please, there are actually two Musas. So his
Okay, Musa Al Hassan. Yeah, he's the
Okay.
one who has raised his hand, so please.
Musa, you're unmuted, so you can speak, please.
Cynthia, if I may, while we await Musa Al-Hassan
Team Tony.
Musa to unmute to speak, just a quick addition to the points that Joanna had made on the earlier question asked about how the project, will seek to support the efforts at dealing with the high cost of politics, which is serving as a barrier for young people. These are matters that we need to amplify our voices on as young people and make sure that these voices are heard, make sure that the people who needs to hear, so that it can possibly translate into legislation on, political financing, campaign financing, and those kinds of things that would help address some of these matters. Those that need to hear are parliamentarians, the members of the executive branch, and so on and so forth get to hear. And that's why, for me, I'm excited about the fact that these conversations or this project has angles for regular engagement, virtual engagement, which allows for people across all regions to be involved. We are getting people who are joining from Yankpala campus, from Tamale campus, and what have you. One of my proposals could be that as part of the virtual speaker series, we could be convening regular Twitter spaces, where we would have such conversations on topical issues. And as the project team had announced, the outcomes of these conversations will be put together into, policy briefs, position papers, opinion pieces from young people to be able to share with the decision makers and the duty bearers, to be able to know what we are thinking, how we think these things must be addressed, and what have you. And I think the opportunity exists for us to do so. I mean, online mobilizations and online conversations, towards change, sees to some results if it is directed properly. And we may have to look at effective ways of doing things like this, especially with the energies that we all have on social media, online, to start addressing our conversations to the right people, to look at ways in which they can address them. I see Hilary's hand is up, so I end here, and Cynthia, you can take up.
All right, thank you for that clarification. Hilary, Musa would type his question, so you can go ahead to ask your question.
Okay, all right. Thank you. If you can hear me, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I also want to thank Joyce for the presentation. I have a quick question, and that has to do with the issue of collaboration. I've actually not heard much about the involvement of the National Youth Authority. A few years ago, I'm aware some activities around Parliament by the authority, which I was also involved. And so I'm asking this question on the premise that if we want to really see the results that we want to have under such projects, we would really need a more sustained period of work. So working within 5 to 10 years, if we want to really see the kinds of results that we expect. And so I want to know whether there's some level of collaboration at that level, and how that is informing the sustained we are putting together. Yeah, so that's about the question I want to ask.
Okay, thank you. Since I do not see any other hands up or any question in the chat box, can Madam Joyce answer this question whilst Musa types his own?
Okay, so thank you very much, Hilary, for the question. When it comes to collaboration, I think that's one of the major nuggets when it comes to the civic space. You can't do this work on your own, so there is lots of collaboration that goes on in the work that we do. So I'll even take the Youth Bridge Foundation as an example. Most of our work in relation to youth representation and participation are done in consultation with, for instance, if it's based at the district level, the district's architecture, we have officers from the district's level we work with. We have stakeholders from different spaces that we have to work with. So it's not just about doing the work alone. As I had mentioned in the presentation, there is a need for stakeholder mapping. And then if you map your stakeholders, and then you know the people that you have to consult or you have to partner with to make sure that the work you are doing is successful, you do that. And I think this is what you are doing now with PN Africa is a manifestation of there's a need for partnership in this work to support ourselves. So PNA Africa is working on this broad project, and then they deem it fit to come to Youth Bridge to make sure that we support them in trying to make sure that they have the things they need to make sure the project goes on. You had mentioned the youth authority. I think, as I had mentioned, if within a particular project we deem it fit to work with the youth authority, we have projects that we'll be working with the youth authority. And I think, as Ben had said, they work mainly with Parliament. It doesn't mean if they need to work with other stakeholders outside the parameters of the Parliament they want. So it's about mapping your stakeholders and making sure you will engage them accordingly.
All right, thank you very much for that response. And I see another question. I hope you answered, Hilary.
Yes, please. Thank you. Thank you.
So I'll move on to the other questions. These are in the chat box, so I'll read them. The second presenter indicated that they are working with 2010 National Youth Policy documents, but I just wanted to make reference to the newly launched NYP document, which was launched in 2022. Also, I want to know what will be done differently in this project because we have been trying so hard to engage duty bearers, but Sanarigo municipal. Unfortunately, only one person out of the 8 candidates showed up. So what would be done differently in this project? This goes to you, Joanna, but hold on, let me read the others so that we may answer them together. Is this program exclusive for students and graduates? That is another question. And would there be training opportunities for individuals who are not formally educated but are involved in or stakeholders of various youth communities, especially in rural areas? This is coming from Aholu Kokwiga. And the other one I read earlier was from Musa. So I hope you got the questions. I think all of these are directed to Joanna.
Okay, thank you, Cynthia. For your question, Musa. Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Good. So, Musa, Parliamentary Network Africa, as the name suggests, is a parliamentary monitoring organization, and most of our work is done with Parliament, and so we are very good when it comes to engaging with Parliament. Yes, there are quite some challenges when you are trying to get them, especially when they are meeting, they have meetings and all of that, and also when they go on recess, some of them travel for other duties outside of the country and all of that. And so when you want to engage them, you have to look at their timing and also take a lot of factors into place. However, this what we intend to do with this project is that we are going to develop policy briefs on the various engagements we are going to have. As mentioned in the presentation on the project, there will be speaker series on various topics of interest when it comes to the challenge in the civics, and all of these will be sent to Parliament. Also, the activity on having a mock parliament, like my colleague mentioned, there will be a shadow report that would also be submitted. And so, yes, Parliament and duty bearers will be aware of the result of some of our engagements that we would be having, the difficulties we face in engaging them also on the district level. And so all the concerns that will be raised will be all put together and then shared with them for them to take note. I mean, going forward, looking at the aspects where we want to support with the setup of a youth forum and a women's forum for the MPs in Parliament, during the orientation, we would mention some of these challenges that have been raised during our engagement for them also to take note going forward in their duties as MPs. I hope that answers your question for now, sir. And then going on to Kopiga. This project is, yes, the focus really is on students and graduates, but we are also engaging institutions like Youth Bridge and other youth-oriented civil society organizations to also come on board and collaborate with the engagement that we would be having. Now, we realized that some of our political parties have entered into that space. They have youth sections in their political parties, and so we feel we'll be able to make some impact there. And then, yes, individuals who are interested to join our engagement as we carry out this project are very welcome, because we won't be just sitting in our car to carry out our activities, going to areas like the Marseille, and even though we will be engaging on campuses, we'll be welcoming areas involved in youth advocacies to join us.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, over to you, Cynthia.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I hope that answers your question, Kwakwika. I know that Musa has asked to speak. Does that mean that your question wasn't well answered? Please put that in the chat box and then we can engage. But for now, I see Alex's hand is up. You may ask your question or comments for the writers. So Alex, you have the floor.
Yeah, all right. Thank you very much. Question, I want to find out how long will Parliamentary Network Africa and Youth Bridge Foundation and other CSOs continue to empower and build the capacity of the youth? Because sometimes I've realized that some of the youth do pull out from the contest and maybe they are not able to emerge victorious and other things is due to maybe they are not well grounded enough. So I want to find out how long will this organization continue to empower the youth? Is it just going to be like the usual thing, we organize a workshop, 1, 2, and that ends it, or how is it going to be? Thank you very much.
I think this falls on your desk to Joan. So both of you, so whoever wants to start first,
Okay.
but before you, I think question coming from YouTube. How are you engaging the youth parliaments are already in existence? So this is another question from someone who is following this on YouTube. I hope you got the question. How are you engaging the youth parliaments already in existence? I also want us to take Samuel's question so that when you finish and conclude the remarks. So Samuel, you can also ask your question.
Thank you very much. So mine is not a new question. I am at another workshop, so I think maybe my attention was off. I'm not too sure whether it's answered, but the question on why using the 2010 youth policy instead of the 2022 one, because I am with the National Youth Authority and I know that the recent one we will not it in 2022. So why using the old one instead of the new one? And then the issue of the youth parliaments, I think I also associate with that question. The National Youth Authority has established youth parliament at the regional levels, and then there are the student parliament. So I don't know how you are also going to involve the youth parliament from the National Youth Authority in addition to that of the student parliament. Thank you.
Thank you. So if your question is asked, I think you can now put your hand down. So maybe let Madam Joyce start, then later Joanna can.
Okay, Cynthia, let me start with the second question from the youth policy. I think this is the second time Musa had referred to it. So the reason I had used the old policy is the fact that we are yet to really have an analysis of the current policy. I'm not stating the fact that it's not in existence or we don't have copy to it. So unless maybe information I had stated from the previous one is in contradiction to the current one, I had made reference to the previous one because that was the document that the presentation was making reference to. Not regardless of the fact that there is a new one, we mostly have a thorough analysis of policies before reference to. So I didn't have that analysis, so I couldn't make reference to it unless I'm corrected that the information that was stated is in contradiction to the current policy. That's for that. And then also the issue of how long we'll be doing this as the question had come. I think for us, we'll be doing it as long as people would come to understand the fact that there is need for us to pay attention. So until we pay attention, we keep saying it, we keep doing it. So he had also made an analogy to the fact that we train more young people and they pull out. These are the things we are talking about. When we train people and they pull out, it's not just about the pulling out. Why are they pulling out? What are the push factors or the pull factors for these people? You need to understand and appreciate before you are able to make any headway in ensuring that the issue you are trying to resolve is being resolved. So we will continue to do this until we know that the society, the structures, the systems, the fundamentals are changing to make sure that young people are in there.
Thank you very much. Joanna, would you want to comment now?
Yes, thank you, Cynthia. So we are not just we are only engaging just the youth parliament with the institutions. Yes, we recognize there are a lot of other youth parliaments in the space to engage as many of you as can, and we've been doing our stakeholder mapping like Civic has been doing with most of their projects. Yes, so we've been looking at who to contact where, because some of the youth parliaments are not as popular as you would get in our various institutions, and so we had to start from somewhere. But we are not leaving out the National Youth Parliament, and that was why we sent out invitations, especially for this Inception meeting, to have as many people as involved as possible and to come on board for us to work together on this project. So it's not as if we are leaving out the National Youth Parliament. No, that's not the only youth parliament we have in the system. We have some in our universities, we have some regional spaces, we also have some in our polytechnics and all over. So we are going to try and engage as many of them as we can in the period that this project will be engaged on. And yes, we know that sometimes it seems like rhetoric, there's youth empowerment and youth capacity building almost all the time. But remember, we are all growing. There are times that some people, like Joyce had indicated, go out of the youth bracket. Yes, we may empower them, they get into parliament, but they may not stay within that bracket for long, they will go out. And so there's a need for continuous engagement, capacity building, empowerment to go on for those upcoming also to find themselves in this space. Thank you, Cynthia.
All right. Thank you very much. I do not see any other question in the chat box. I hope all your questions have been answered. If you feel your question has been unanswered, you can kindly send us a direct message and we'll answer that question. But in the meantime, I yield the floor to Joanna to give us a closing remarks, and if there are any announcements, she gives us same. But also, I want to remind you that we'll be taking a group picture. So after her remarks, please put on your video so that we can take a group photograph. So yeah,
Okay.
over to you, Joanna.
Thank you once again, Cynthia. First of all, I would like to say a big thank you to all of you for today. Yes, a lot has been trying to get into the civic space. Also, the various avenues that is also looking at what civil society can do in building capacity, both soft and then hard, and mentorship. Here in Africa, for instance, has a document that looks at how to make it easier for civil society to engage with parliament. And this document, I think, other people in the space, even the youth in your various groupings, to be able to engage with parliament. So yes, there's a lot that can be done going forward. And so we are asking that when we approach you, you also come on board to join us as we carry out this project. Yes, as our very first town hall meeting, we are taking advantage of University of Ghana Parliament House 20th anniversary to do a public forum on the private members bill regime in Ghana. 2020, the motion was passed for private members bills to be submitted on the floor. And so we'll be taking this opportunity to commemorate the 4 years and also to have a discussion on the regime so far, what we've been able to do with it, the challenges that have come up, the big issues that have resulted since the implementation of the private bill. And then subsequently, as I mentioned earlier, we will be going to campuses around Kumasi. We are looking at also going to the north. So we would be engaging students in these areas, not just students, but also would be inviting civil society organizations who are into youth advocacy and gender advocacy to also join us as we set to engage, discuss how best we can put our joint hands to make it easier for us to also enter the civic space as it is, look at the issues that we face, the challenges that we face, and how to surmount them. So yes, that is what will be happening in the months ahead, leading to the December general election. So we would consider also challenges that we face during electional periods. What can we do to change the rhetoric that youth are used for the unsavory part of getting people to vote for a certain political party one way or the other, youth being purported as violent and all of those things. How do we change that rhetoric going forward? So once again, thank you for your time, and then we are looking to see all of you actively participate in the various activities that will be upcoming going forward. Thank you.
Thank you too. Thank you everyone for joining. Kindly put on your video so that we can take a group photograph. I think okay, I think okay, there are more coming. Yeah. Okay, thank you everyone for joining us. Have a fruitful day, and we hope to see you at our next event. Thank you.